Good morning, everybody. The Economistas, a Brazilian Women in Economics Research Group, coordinated by Fabiana Rocha and Paula Pereira, also here, and by me. Thanks, everyone, for attending our third FIPE Economistas session at Brazilian Econometric Society meeting. FIPE, Fundação Instituto de Pesquisas Econômicas, is a non-profit private-owned organization founded in 1973. FIPE's research aims to contribute for promoting discussion of Brazil's economic and social problems and designing and evaluating economic and other public policies. It currently works in the areas of teaching, projects, research, and development of economic and financial indicators. The Economistas also thanks FIPE for all the support since the beginning of the group. We're also grateful to Professors José Raimundo Carvalho at the Federal University of Ceará, Rodrigo Moreno Serra at Center of Health Economics of the University of York, and Professor Francisco Pino at Universidade de Chile for accepting the invitation to participate with us. And now I hand over to Professor José Raimundo, who will coordinate our session. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Professor Maria Dolores. I'd like to start by saying how happy I'm here. Thanks a lot. I mean, to have this opportunity to discuss such an important scientific topic related to domestic violence, especially in these times of COVID. Also, I would like to welcome Professor Rodrigo Serra from the University of York, as well Professor Francisco Pino from Universidade de Chile, and also all audience, as well Professor Paula Carvalho and Professor Fabiana. So, I mean, it's with such a great pleasure that I'm kind of acting as a chairman of this special session. I've been involved with domestic violence since, I would say, 2012 or 2014. So it's been 6 or 7 years I've been doing this kind of line of research. Originally, I'm an econometrician. Actually, I started as a theoretical econometrician, then moved to an applied econometrician. And then finally, I've been trying to apply all this modeling and all these analysis that we economists got in our PhD with issues related to violence, to homicide, and now to domestic violence, okay? So, I mean, it's a crucial topic in Brazil, actually in Latin America especially. We have high rates of domestic violence. The prevalence is very high also in Latin America. Also, especially in Brazil, even though we have a federal law, the law Maria da Penha, it's been more than 10 years that this law is working in Brazil, we still have many problems. So because of that, I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, I started a project in order to get data, because I think that one of the most crucial problems in this area is to have good data. And it was such a very nice opportunity to interact and to have Rodrigo, also Francisco, Maria Dolores, to discuss the issue of domestic violence in a time of COVID. We have almost an unanimity without good data that COVID increased significantly the domestic violence, okay? And that's very important to see what happened in households, okay, during this COVID. This is a universal threat to not only public health, but also to social and economic policy. The world will not be the same after COVID. The domestic violence issues, the policies applied to that, the whole economic policies applied to social and also economic issues will have to change in order to tackle, in order to face these new threats in terms of very high rates of domestic violence. So it's again, it's a very timely issue. I congratulate Professor Maria Dolores, Professor Fabiana, also Rodrigo and Francisco. It's very nice topic. I'm also personally interested on that. I think that should be on a universal agenda. And I just would like to welcome you and to again, thanks all the organization from the Brazilian Econometrics meeting as well, all sponsors, the audience. Hopefully the audience is comprised not only of women. It's very important to have men in this agenda, and I'm very happy to see Rodrigo and Francisco here. And that's it. I think that the best role of the chairman is to make the session work well. So I will finish here and just pass to, I think, Rodrigo, okay? So welcome, Rodrigo, and have a very nice talking and feel very welcome here, you as well as Francisco. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to try and share my screen here just to put up the slides. Okay, so let me know if it's working. Is it working?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, well, thank you, José Raimundo, for the great introduction. Thanks also for everybody for attending this session. A very good morning to everyone there in Brazil. I don't know if there are people joining us from other parts of the world. Welcome and warm greetings as well. Good afternoon for me here in the UK, and I apologize in advance if as I go along with my presentation, things start to become darker and darker because it's winter here in the UK, and it's winter is on us here. So please bear with me. So my name is Rodrigo Moreno Serra. I am an associate professor of global health economics at the Center for Health Economics of the University of York in the UK. I am also the UK principal investigator of this project that I'm going to tell you a little bit about, which is about the effects, the consequences of social distancing measures implemented during the pandemic on violence against women. And that's a joint project with my colleagues from the University of Sao Paulo, Dolores Montoya Diaz, Paula Pereda, and Fabiana Rocha. We're very happy to present to you not only a description of the project, but also Dolores will follow me with some description of our preliminary results and some description of the data. So just to give you an overview, this is an 18-month project which just started, and it's funded by the UK Research Councils through their Global Challenges Research Fund and the Newton Fund Agile Response Call to address COVID-19. As I said, we just started, so there is more to come here, hopefully. Okay, so as a little bit of background first to why we decided to embark on this journey. Well, as you know, and José Raimundo rightly mentioned, domestic violence against women is a major issue in Brazil. And it's not something that started because of the pandemic. It's something that was here in Brazil before that. So Brazil ranked 5th in the world in femicides, that is the killing of women because of their gender, before the pandemic. And about half of the cases of domestic violence perpetrated in Brazil, they are perpetrated by an intimate partner. And as I said, it's not a pandemic issue. There has been a sharp increase, though, in domestic violence case in Brazil after the social distance measures were enacted in 2020, mostly from March 2020. So, for example, if we just compare the period March-April 2020 with the same period in 2019, we see that there has been a 22% increase in femicides on average in 12 Brazilian states. And I think the urgent issue is not only for Brazil, because you see similar reports globally about the levels of domestic violence going up after the introduction of social distance measures. So that has happened both in low and middle income countries, but also in high income countries like here in the UK. The reports are the same. In the US, there's plenty of work being done on that. So it's a very general issue that certainly deserves some consideration. So just to give you a little bit of a flavor of the dimensions of the problem that we've been just looking at descriptive data. So the figure one here shows the number of domestic violence calls to the police emergency number in Brazil, and we see that it's not a homogeneous phenomenon. So, for example, in the state of Acre, there has been an increase, but a very small 1 or 2% between the periods of March 2019 and March 2020 in the number of domestic violence calls. But then you see that data for Sao Paulo, for example, and there is a huge increase in the number of domestic violence calls, about 45%. And the other figure that struck some of our attention is that the share of femicides over homicides has actually increased quite a lot in some states. So, for example, even though in Pará it hasn't increased that much, when you look at Rio Grande do Norte and Sao Paulo, the increase has been sharp. And in Sao Paulo, for example, if you just look at the absolute number of femicide, it has increased by about 54% in that period. So we're talking about huge magnitudes here. Now, this is not to say that there is a causal link here, and that's really only related to the pandemic and the social distancing measures. But it does suggest the possibility that there might be a link, right? And I think whether there is a link or not is an empirical question. There are theoretical reasons why we could expect there being a link between those two things. So after the implementation of social distancing measures, like, for example, business closures or stay-at-home orders, it has increased the length of time that women stay at home with potentially abusive partners. So they're staying at home for longer with those abusive partners. So that in itself might be a major risk factor. And there are other issues at play. So, for example, economic issues as well. So we know that because of the pandemic and those business closure measures, we have a situation where a financial hardship might have afflicted quite a few households, and that might have heightened tensions within households as well. And therefore, it provides a fertile ground as well for domestic violence to take place. These measures have also isolated women from services that are specialized in domestic violence, have isolated those women from family networks that might discourage abusive behavior. So there are plenty of reasons why we could expect the social distancing measures and the pandemic itself to be related to that. But it's an empirical question, and that's the work that we want to do here in this project, and it's the work that others have been doing, like Francisco Pino will present the work being done in Chile. So the topic is very important, of course. I mean, the first and main reason why it's an important topic is because there is evidence that violence has long-lasting physical and mental trauma effects for victims. So that in itself is a major reason why we could be interested in this. There's also more economic questions related to this and reasons. So, for example, there is evidence showing that victims of domestic violence, they are more likely to miss work. They are more likely to earn less than non-victims. They are more likely to have longer unemployment spells. And they are also more likely to have unhealthy children than non-victims. So there is some evidence, descriptive, but also some causal studies that have been done that have shown those links. So one would expect that if pandemics and the social distancing measures have had an effect, it's probably going to have long-term consequences as well. And there is a problem also from the point of view of inequities. This sort of violence against women may exacerbate pre-existing inequities, because there's also some evidence that domestic violence against women, for example, in Brazil, disproportionately affects women from disadvantaged backgrounds. So these women are already lagging behind in socioeconomic terms, and the fact that they have been affected by violence may actually exacerbate those lags. So if we know that the contagion rates are increasing in many countries, that there might be second and third contagion waves, so we could expect further social distancing measures to be implemented. And so it becomes increasingly important for us to think about this topic and produce evidence that can be used to inform policies that protect women against the implementation of these pandemic-related measures. The problem is that for those policies to be implemented, there are plenty of gaps in the evidence base. There has been very little rigorous evidence to guide policy response. For example, first of all, on the simple relationship between social distancing measures and domestic violence against women, so the causal link between the two. There is ongoing work, a lot of ongoing work that probably will fill in some of these gaps, and that's a reason for optimism. But there is very little being done on issues, for example, about the broader cost to society of the social distancing effects on domestic violence against women. For example, the cost to the public health system in terms of treating victims. And so once you implement social distancing measures, it's going to be spillover effects for the public purse as well. And those haven't been considered yet. So for example, the cost to the health system, but also costs in terms of labor productivity and so on. And finally, there has been little research on the mediating role played by policies that are not designed to deal with domestic violence, but they are designed to mitigate the consequences of social distancing. For example, measures like the furlough scheme here in the UK, which prevented people going unemployed, paying part of their salaries, but also measures like the implementation of emergency financial help, auxílio emergencial in Brazil, and other measures like this. So they might have an effect over the social distancing effect on violence. So let me tell you a little bit about the BRAVE project, in which we are trying to fill in some of these gaps. As I said, it's an 18-month project, and we got as key research questions. The first one is, what has been the causal effect of social distancing on the incidence of domestic violence in Brazil? The second one is how this effect has varied across localities and with different socioeconomic and demographic profiles. So we're interested in uncovering some distributional impact, if you like, of domestic violence. What have been the likely pathways for effects on domestic violence? For example, has financial hardship among households played a role for any effects that we see? What is the magnitude of the broader cost to society of these social distance measures, especially economic costs like productivity, but also health costs to the health system? Because in Brazil, the public health system covers a lot of people, over 75% of the population at least. It has only the public system to resort to. So it's an important question from a public financing perspective as well. And how have government policies aimed at mitigating the negative consequence of social distancing influenced domestic violence against women? So measures like the implementation of special numbers for people to report domestic violence, auxílio emergencial, so financial help, and others. We're going to use a lot of secondary data sources. Dolores will talk a little bit about or more about that in a bit. She was explaining all the data that we are currently looking at and more data that we are planning to look at. We have a number of methods that we are going to be used to analyze those data. We're looking at data over time, so panel data estimators will be the main source of analysis for us, but also we're going to be incorporating some causal mediation analysis, for example, to look at the relationship between other policies, social distancing, and domestic violence as well. And we have a few key outputs that we want to take out from this project. The first one being this master data set of data for Brazilian municipalities on social distancing, but also domestic violence. A literature review report with the up-to-date evidence on the topic, at least 2 empirical academic papers, 2 policy briefs that we are seeking to co-develop with project partners. Dolores will talk a little bit about a project partner that is already involved in this project. So we see this as a possibility to gather evidence that will serve the purpose of informing public policies. We think that that's particularly important. And finally, we were definitely committed to follow-on grant application as well, in which we are going to expand the research that we are doing, but looking at a more broader Latin American context. So what's happening in other countries of the region as well, because as I mentioned at the beginning, it's far from being an issue restricted to Brazil or Chile or countries here in the Southern Cone. So yeah, so that's basically that from me. I think I'm going to leave it there and yeah, open for Dolores to keep the talking about the project, and then Francisco and others to chime in. So thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks, Rodrigo. So now, Maria Dolores, would you please follow him?
Thank you all. I will the host disabled participant screen sharing. I think I need permission. To share.
Now you can.
Ah, thank you. Do you see my, okay, thank you. Yes. First, I think it's important to talk about why when we started to focus to have domestic violence against women in our focus of the analysis, because we started with other purpose, but since last year when José Raimundo and in an event with José Raimundo, we and Maria da Penha at FEA USP, at the end of the last year, we understand that domestic violence is a very important question to be analyzed, and unfortunately, the pandemic shows how this is an urgent to have more research in this topic. And so we have, Paula has 2 or 3 students who helped us in this presentation, in this preliminary study. Isadora and Pedro, who are working with this theme also. I have one other student work with this theme. And fortunately, we have, it was possible to have Rodrigo in this new partnership to develop this project he has talked about. So the idea of this presentation is today is to show our preliminary results, focusing mainly on the state of São Paulo. The structure of the presentation is to show some of the data, and in this line of research, data is a very difficult question to solve because of many reasons. Some of them I will discuss during the presentation, but it's important to have this the idea of the complexity of the phenomenon. It has many different dimensions, and so we only focus on femicide. Here, the COVID impact suggests, and Rodrigo mentioned some of the statistics, simple statistics, but if we follow some other sources, we have we know the reporting and reduction in reporting of many different kinds of crimes against the woman, and it's a common sense, the underreporting, even in other times, not only in the pandemic. The underreporting is a very known problem with this kind of data. The exception is femicide, and in simple statistics, we found mixed results. And because of this, we found many not, but some people mentioned that even femicide is not special case or different from other murder suffered by men. And we think it's important to mention that fortunately the audience here is huge and showing that it's increasing the recognition of the importance of studying policies and actions to avoid and to solve the problem of domestic violence. And so if we have different times during the pandemic, we know mixed results, even in femicide statistics. And so it's because of this, we think it's important to focus even in this such most serious type of crime. José Raimundo showed and even mentioned Maria da Penha law that I think we need to recognize that it's a very important law that shows distinct aspects and has some kind of policies and prescriptions that helps to treat the complexity of the phenomenon. And here we have the 5 types, and we can see this kind of in our preliminary data. These are the most, for example, sexual crime, the rape is the most common. The most common crime we have included in this category during the period of the data. But these classes or these categories shows how diverse and how different dimensions we can include in this broader crime called domestic violence against women. And so here we found this cycle of domestic violence. It's a common we can find this in many distinct sources, but the idea is to show that the first phase is tension building. Abuser criticizes the victim, threatens with bodily harm, and is mood and unpredictable. Explosion, when we found the crimes effectively, maybe verbal, physical, psychological, moral, patrimonial violence. But the third phase is called honeymoon. And when abuser feels guilt, becomes extremely affectionate, and the victim believes in the change, only to have new cycle start again. And as we found in references, in increasing frequencies. And so it's a very complex cycle to even because this last phase makes the victim less to report less what happened in phase 2. And so the idea here, we have data on domestic violence against women of different kinds for only for March and April 2020. Here we have more than femicides, we have other types of crime, and the idea is to have a profile of what happened and if we can find different profiles among the types of these categories, these 5 categories, if we can find different profiles for race, education, but this is not the database we will focus to make the analysis. Here is only a preliminary data, only to have this more simple statistics. Here we have a map that shows the most occurrences happened far from the center of São Paulo. This is a metropolitan region of São Paulo, and the number of occurrences or cases we can find here in different spaces. And type of domestic violence. We can find here an important percentage of psychological one, and per day of week, Sunday, we have more frequency of cases reported. By color, we have not found any differences by type. And this, we think about the possibility that underreporting may be different from Black people from white, but in reporting, we can have the most part of reports are made by white women. And so this is a point we need to understand also. By education, the only interesting thing there are no many differences among types, but for patrimonial crimes, there are a greater percentage of women with higher education. It's interesting, for example, compared to sexual ones. Time per week, the most reports are found at night. There are no differences significant differences by day, but night is we found that it's a bad hour of the day for this violence. Here only probably Francisco will have very extensive literature to discuss. We only focus here to show that we haven't found many references about femicide. The most common is calls for policy services or other NGOs, organizations that provide some help for reporting. The exception is this study for India that use policy reports, including femicides in crimes to be analyzed. And so we think this is a important point to analyze. Well, as everybody knows, COVID and prompted several need to different kinds of social isolation measures, more restrict or more regional, great, but the idea is that it was a universal measure trying to reduce the incidence of the pandemic, the cases. And the idea is that we have seen an increase of reports, but no, this is not correspond policy records in the same relation. So we will focus our analysis in the impact of social isolation and financial aid program on numbers of femicides in the state of São Paulo. This preliminary data with details about the type of crimes we only have for metropolitan region of São Paulo, but for femicide we have the detailed data for all the state with more information about the cases.
Excuse me, Dolores, a kind reminder that you've been talking for 15 minutes. The organization asked me to let you know, okay?
No, sure. I will stay in time.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The idea is that in the next step, we will have many other points to be analyzed. Rodrigo has mentioned some of them. And so I will present the database, our database. We have detailed information about the crime, date, city, neighborhood, the victim, the name of the victim, some details about age, not so good data for education. And here we have the variable that was used our main strategy to trying to identify the causal effect of isolation or the pandemic. The idea is to use the information of some motivation of the crime, because we have the information if we have simple homicide or simple murder, or in conjunction with drugs, fraud, criminal organization, or domestic violence. There are many other, but we decided to use this because we think they probably will not be will be a good control group, not be impacted by social distance measures. Isolation index is famous in loco, available for this period, starting February, 1st February, until the end of November. Financial aid was a law. It was, we think, the most important economic measure to mitigate the economic pandemic effects. They consist of a financial aid of 600 reais to many people. Formal is to informal workers, micro entrepreneurs, self-employed, informal, but it was a huge program, very huge. It was limited to 2 members in the same family, but we know, analyzing the data, we see that the most part was given only to 1 member of the family, but it was possible to have 2 people receiving it. Because of this, we need to treat to the data, and the idea is to construct a variable of coverage of the program by city. Coverage measured as number of people that has received the money compared to population. Our specification was simple. The idea is to use, as I previously mentioned, motivation, different motivations as control groups. But we have so many fixed effects to trying, because the period is short, and we think it's a valid strategy to control, to fix the effects by city, year, and month of occurrence. It's a good and valid strategy. And we try to explore heterogeneous effects, including COVID and the interaction between COVID and post-COVID period, and financial aid measured as as population coverage. And we made some inclusion of isolation index also. Here we have some descriptive statistics with cases and cases in drugs, fraud, criminal organization, the idea, the mean variable, and we have the curious that there are cities with 100% of coverage, all people in the city covered by the program. Our results, it was interesting to see that, yes, our results confirms that femicide increases during the pandemic, and financial aid mitigates these effects. It was very, this is the graph to show in blue, we can find time heterogeneity, and in red, the effects of interaction with financial aid control. Here, we estimated with different control groups in the baseline all the observations, and this only with fraud, only with criminal organization and drugs, and the results is robust for all these different specifications or control groups. Finally, we compare the results using only a binary variable and isolation measure. We see that this impact is shorter than this one, but and this is an interesting result, because maybe isolation index is endogenous, and this is we intend to explore in next steps. We have other paper presented in Unpack by Deborah and Pedro, students we have worked with us at that moment, and they found using percentage of the strategy to use a percentage of in the election of President Bolsonaro as an instrumental variable to trying to treat endogeneity of specification index. And so we'd like to thank you for FIPE. Doutora Jamila is the Chief of Women Policy Delegacias da Mulher, sorry. Yes, and so she helps us with some information, and we would like to thanks her partnership in this project, and we'd like to thank 3 excellent research assistants, Isadora, Pedro, both Pedros that has worked so hard in these estimations, and that's all. Thank you very much. This is we think this is will be we will have more detailed results in next events, and so I think that's all. Thank you very much. I hope in time.
Okay, okay. Thanks a lot, Maria Dolores, for your nice presentation, as well as Rodrigo. I was advised by the organization to allow questions from the audience only after the second presentation by Professor Francisco Pino, okay? So now it's time to hand over to Francisco. Okay, Francisco, so take your time and let us know about your research.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me and can you see the slides?
Yes, yes. I can see it.
Very good, thanks. Thank you so much for inviting me to this session to present our work. I think it complements what Rodrigo and Dolores were presenting, so I think we're going to have a nice discussion afterwards. So this is joint work with Sonia Balotra, Emilia Brito, Damian Clark, and Pilar Laroulette. And we want to, well, I can show you. We want to understand the role that the pandemic and particularly the quarantines has had on domestic violence. So after the great introduction by Rodrigo, I think I have very little to add. Just reiterate that the pandemic has led to a surge in domestic violence. That seems to be pretty clear, and it is consistent. This was already mentioned by Rodrigo, and it's people that are spending more time together. It's more likely to observe domestic violence. This is already documented when what happens on weekends, holidays, etc. And therefore, under quarantine, it's more likely to happen. Also, the pandemic has led to economic stress and unemployment, and that also seems to be one of the key drivers for domestic violence. And also, this has been already observed in other pandemics or natural disasters. Okay, so that's the context. What we are going to do, we're going to try to contribute to this literature, trying to understand the effects of the pandemic. In the particular case of Chile, I'll show you the particular features. We're going to analyze both entry into quarantine and exit from quarantine. I think that's one of the contributions that we have. And we are going to try, this is still work in progress, the mechanisms part. So I'll give you some idea. This paper is all about administrative data. So I'll tell you what we have. I totally agree that data here is the key, and I'll show you where we are weaker and where we're stronger in terms of data. Regarding the quarantines, so what is particular about Chile is that the quarantines were implemented at the municipality level. Municipalities, so cities are larger units, and cities might have more than one municipality. Chile doesn't have as many municipalities as Brazil, so we have in total around 350 municipalities in Chile. But for instance, Santiago, the largest city, has around 40 municipalities. So even within a city, you can have some municipalities that have quarantine and some others that don't. So we're going to use that variation in order to identify the effect of quarantines on domestic violence, okay? And stuff started in mid-March. In May, there were already 143 municipalities that had quarantine, and exits started in July. So the average duration of quarantines was around 2 months. And I'll show you some examples. And what determines the entry and exit is basically the central government that has monitored the evolution of the pandemic and determines which municipalities entry and which exit quarantine. This is not, you know, this is not based on what the mayor of the municipality decides. This is really the central government that determines which municipalities enter and exit. Okay, so to identify an assumption here throughout the paper is going to be that, you know, the timing of the quarantine is sort of quasi-exogenous to domestic violence. Okay, and we are going to be able to show that with the pre-trends. Okay, so this I think I already mentioned. I'll show you a little bit of the techniques. So I think that's also a contribution. We're using the most up-to-date techniques in terms of difference in difference. We also do event studies, but the results I'm going to be showing you are based on difference in difference. I'll explain that a little bit later. So these are the sources of data. This is what we're going to be having. So in fact, we're going to have distress calls on hotlines. So we have the police hotline. These are not reports, okay? These are not reports, but just people asking, you know, about domestic violence, etc. These people, you know, the operators help, you know, guide people how to make a complaint, a formal complaint, or you know, a report, to file a report. And there's the one from the police, and we also have the one from the Ministry of Women. And so here I'm showing you what frequencies we have. For some data we have monthly data, for others we have daily data, etc. It'll be clear when I show you the results. And then we have the criminal complaints. So we have the complaints to the police, and these are daily. This is daily data. We have information on women's shelters, and that's daily. And we also have this is work in progress. I'm not going to show you those results, but we're collecting still those results on the WhatsApp line. And we have this policy called Mascarilla 19, which is when you go to a pharmacy, you can tell the guy at the counter, you know, this keyword, and he'll know that you are actually you know, asking for help, basically on domestic violence. We're collecting the data. We don't have that yet. In terms of mobility, we do have cell phone mobility data, and that's going to be daily, actually hourly. And we have unemployment data that's from a survey that's not going to be representative at the municipality level, but I'm still going to show you some results. But we're getting better data, but that's still work in progress. Okay, and these are summary statistics. I think I'm going to skip that in the interest of time. We can go back to that later. I want to show you how quarantines work. So this is a map of the metropolitan region where Santiago is based, and I'm going to show you. So in the graph on the left, you're going to see municipalities that enter and exit quarantine, and on the right, I'm going to be plotting the share of the population under quarantine in million of people. Okay, Santiago has around 8 million inhabitants, so you're going to be seeing how this was developing over time. And I'm going to be plotting the green line is going to be the people that are entering quarantine, and then the orange line is going to be, you know, people that are exiting quarantine. Okay, so let's start. So this starts around mid-March. Some municipalities enter into quarantine, and then you know, we get a little bit more, but actually one exits, but then a couple of weeks later enters again, and then these others exit, then some more, a little bit more, and then you see by the beginning of May, you have all this area under quarantine, and then a little bit later, June, you have more municipalities, and then so basically that stays for a while. That's almost all the population of Santiago under quarantine. And then beginning of August, you start seeing municipalities getting out of quarantine, right? So this is the orange line that you see here. Slowly, more and more. This is beginning of September. We already have more people out of quarantine than people under quarantine. So you see that end of September, almost no one is under quarantine. And that's basically where we are now. I have to say though that now we are on a preventive kind of quarantine light that started just today, where we have quarantine over weekends, but on weekdays we're still without quarantine. So that started right now because the cases are now picking up in Santiago. So this is just to show you how things work, and we're going to be using this variation, you see, within the city, across municipalities to identify the effect of quarantine on domestic violence. Okay. Okay, and this is just the same idea, the same plot. This is basically the number of municipalities. Now this is for the whole country. These are the municipalities, the number of municipalities that have ever been under quarantine. And this is the number of municipalities that where quarantine has been removed. And this is the cumulative on the left, and on the right is the sort of dynamic version. Okay. So now let me show you some figures for whether quarantine works. So this is the mobility data that we have. So these are cell phone data, and people can classify so whether the individuals are in a residential area, or whether they are in their workplace, or whether they are in a grocery store, etc. So you can see, and the red line is the beginning of the quarantine period for basically, this is when school closed. I forgot to say, but actually schools closed nationally, but then, municipalities were entering quarantine in this manner that I just showed you. So the red line is when school closed. So this is the beginning of the quarantine period, if you want. And you see immediately as an increase in mobility within residential areas, and a drop in workplaces, and also a drop in grocery stores. So it seems that the quarantines did work in reducing mobility, in workplaces and in stores. Regarding, these are just descriptives for the calls to the helplines. And you can see here that there's so the blue lines are the number of calls. And you do see that there's an increase in calls. So this is again the beginning of quarantine, and you see spike around a month and a half after the beginning of quarantines. You see this spike in the number of calls, and then it gets slowly reduced over time. What is going to be important, I forgot to mention, that's one of other contributions. We're going to be able to measure this ratchet effect. So basically, it seems that the level is higher, you see, after the quarantine than what it was before the beginning of the quarantine. And then these are calls to the police. There's a similar pattern there. Here we have a little bit more information. You see, we can classify it as economic violence, physical or psychological violence. These are the trends regarding the shelters, and we also see an increase in shelter occupancy about 2 months since the beginning of quarantine, and that has been going down afterwards. These are the criminal complaints, and this is what you've seen in other places in the world, right? So increasing calls, but nothing going on criminal complaints, on reports, right? So here I don't know if you can see this, but we're plotting. So the red lines are complaints to the police in year 2020. And in gray colors, you see what happened in 2019 and 18. And you can see that the lines almost overlap. Actually, if you see here, total crimes are actually lower. And if you see the rate, you see that it's also slightly lower than what was being the case for 2018 and 19. Okay, so briefly, I'll tell you what we do. This is just to show you how it works. So this is one municipality. So this is the date, the week where it entered quarantine, then it stayed on quarantine, and then exited quarantine. So we're going to be using these two events to do separate analysis for the entry and then a separate analysis for the exit. And these you see are the trends in terms of calls to the helpline. For instance, you see the spike here in the middle of the quarantine, and you see mobility going down as well. So this is basically the idea in one figure. Okay, and we're going to be using three methods. So for now, I'm going to be showing you results from, so this is the recent development by the Chase Martin and Dotfui. This is the AR paper in this year. It's an extended difference in difference framework. The idea is, you basically consider switchers at each point in time. That's the main thing. So, and then you average over time if you want, but what I'm going to be showing you are just the plots. So I'm going to be showing you the results by each time, depending on which data we're using. If it's daily data, I'm going to be showing you by day, and if it's weekly data, by week, etc., etc. Okay, so these are the results we believe the most. We have also done event study regressions, and also we have also regressions where we put one coefficient for the quarantine, and then one when the municipality enters quarantine, and then another coefficient when it exits, and that allows us to see this ratchet effect, to see whether the level after the quarantine ended is the same as pre-quarantine. And actually what we're finding is that the level for domestic violence is higher. So it seems that there is this ratchet effect. But what I'm going to be showing you is the Chase Martin and Dotfui results, the DIDM, as it is being called. Okay, so let me start with the stress calls. So these are the results. So let me explain how it works. So basically, so 0 is the date where the quarantine was imposed, and so this is months to quarantine imposition. So basically, 3 means 3 months after the quarantine was imposed, 6 is 6 months after, and so on. And so we also can analyze the pre-trends, right? So we can see what was happening 3 months before, 6 months, and so on. Okay, and what you see is, so it seems quite flat for the months in advance. It starts picking up a little bit beforehand, and this we think has to do with the fact that the schools closed earlier, before the quarantine started. So maybe this effect that we see here 1 month before, or maybe 2 months before, could be due to the fact that schools were closed before the quarantine actually started. Okay, but then the truth is that starting from month 4 and 6 and 5 and 6, we see this huge spike in calls to these are calls to the police hotline. This is the entry analysis, and then we can do the exit analysis. And what we see is that after the quarantine it's removed, we see this decrease in calls. Okay, and this is quite robust. We can do it with the event study, and it's quite similar. We can do it the regression results. I don't want to bother you with the regression results. We can also condition on post entry only. Here I'm showing you, not conditioning on post entry. We can reduce. We can basically shrink the data to just use the post entry data. Results are more noisy, but point to the same direction. Okay, so basically we see an increase in calls to the hotline, and let me show you what happens on women's shelters. Here we have daily data, so that's why you see a more a more granular result. And we have a little bit less precision, but the results are similar. Once the quarantine starts, we start to see an increase in basically in usage of these shelters, and then a reduction once the quarantine is lifted. Okay. We wanted to check whether there were some supply side changes. So is this due to people using more shelters, or is it actually that the shelters, are also closing, and maybe that's why we see a higher occupancy rate? And it doesn't seem to be the case. So actually the shelter occupancy, once the quarantine started, actually it seems to have increased. We have some it's a little bit noisy. The data is a little bit noisy, but it actually seems to have increased the number of spots, available spots in these shelters. So actually, if we do the same analysis with the spots available, we don't see much. Okay, we don't see this effect. So this is doing the same difference in difference analysis, but now with spots available. Okay, and we don't see a change once the quarantine started. Actually, if anything, it seems to have increased the number of available spots. Okay, and nothing at the when we look at the exit. So it's not supply side driven, it seems to be demand side driven. What about reporting? We have a little bit more noisy results, but it seems that once the quarantine started, we see this decrease in reporting, particularly in the months right after the imposition of the quarantine. Then it goes back to closer to zero effect. And for exit, we see this increase in reporting once the quarantine is lifting, so people can move and can go and do their and report the domestic violence to the police. Even though actually you can report online or by phone, but actually it seems to have the quarantine seems to have had an effect. And of course, it's difficult to report on the phone when you have the perpetrator sitting beside you, right? So that those are the results we're finding now. So let me summarize a little bit what we have so far. In terms of calls to distress calls, we have a huge increase, around 150% increase in calls. And shelter usage, we have a 6% increase in shelter usage, while reporting decreases by around 17%. Okay. What else? Exit. Well, the dynamics seem to be relevant. So we do see this decrease in calls, but actually if you look at the regression results, we see this ratchet effect. So we see that they remain still higher than in the baseline, so that in the pre-quarantine period. Okay, so it seems that the violence was it's still higher in terms of levels. And then we do see also an increase in the police report with respect to the pre-quarantine levels. Okay, so these are the main results that we have. In the minutes that I have, I'll show you a little bit of the mechanisms. So this is still suggestive, and we are still working on this. So this is mobility. So we do see, as I already kind of show you, that when municipalities enter into quarantine, we do see this reduction in mobility. So it seems that that is the big driver. So people are packed in the same household, and that increases violence. Quarantine exit, you also see this increase in mobility. What might puzzle you is why are these spikes, downward spikes? And this is because the first step out of mobility, out of quarantine, was this quarantine light that I was explaining. So people were able to move over the week, and then they were quarantined over the weekend, and that's why you see this decrease in mobility, for 2 days. Those are weekends, and then back up when the week starts. So that's why you see this jumpy graph over here, and then once you get out of the quarantine altogether, you see this increase in mobility. Okay, so that's for the exit. In terms of unemployment, so as I already mentioned, we don't have representative data at the municipality level for unemployment. So these are still quite suggestive results. So this is the overall, this is descriptive, this is the overall rate of unemployment. So unemployment increased for both men and women, you know, after the start of quarantine. This is at the national level. And the workforce also was reduced after the start of the quarantine. If you do the difference in different estimates, they are quite noisy. If anything, there seems to be a reduction, but this is still super noisy, and I think we don't get the same results if you look at the event study. So we're still working on this. We're getting better data. We're getting data from the unemployment insurance and try to proxy for, you know, queries to the unemployment insurance to proxy for unemployment. So that's still work in progress, and we're hoping to get a better data once those data are available. Okay, this is regarding labor force participation, also super noisy. There seemed to be a reduction in labor force participation, but it's actually quite noisy. And we think the reason for this is that, you know, since, for instance, take Santiago. I was showing you the map. People are quarantined in one municipality, but they are likely to work in different municipalities. So in fact, I live in one municipality and the university is in another municipality. So when I was quarantine, you know, I was quarantined in my municipality. But if people are working somewhere else, you know, the fact that you are quarantined in one municipality doesn't necessarily mean that you are fired if you're working in somewhere else, right? If you can still go to your place of work, you know, probably you know, the effects on employment were much broader than the quarantine that was much more specific to the municipality. This is what we have for now. So we see this increase in domestic violence, in you know, proxied by distress calls, by the usage of shelters, but we do see less police reports. The lifting of quarantine seems to reverse these trends, but they're still not full reversal, and we see this ratchet effect. In terms of work in progress, what we're doing now, so we're trying to get more data, particularly the one on employment that I was mentioning. And we are now trying to implement a survey that is going to follow individuals. Actually, it will follow women. Women were interviewed for a domestic violence survey right before the start of the quarantine, like in January and February of this year. And we're going to follow. We will do a follow-up of these women in January, between January and March of 2021, to try to understand better the mechanisms of this increase in violence, and try to better understand the issues with reporting that I've already mentioned. So that's for now. I think I was quick so that we have more time to discuss. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your comments.
Okay, so thanks, Francisco. Well, as far as I understood, we are going to have a quick discussion among us, or we're going straight to open to questions from audience. Paula, would you please help me on these details?
Sure. I think that first you can comment a little bit the two words, and then we hand over to the audience. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine with me, but I mean, I would just intermediate the discussions, or how does it work here in SBE? Okay, so I'll try to handle it with Rodrigo, Maria, and Francisco. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I mean, it's been an impressive amount of very interesting results, and that points to very potential discoveries in an extremely important topic. So I mean, I will have, I don't want actually to spend too much time because I have just brief comments and a couple of questions which I try to handle. I mean, I will start with Francisco. Okay, Francisco, how do you guys incorporate, okay, the heterogeneity of the risk of getting COVID-19? Because this is quite important. I mean, it depends on I would say the profile of the demographics of the municipality, which is, I think it's something very important to include on any account of modeling the impacts of the COVID, because the risks are very different depending on sex composition, age composition, and actually on the expectations that they have. So I'd like just to hear a brief comment. So then after this, I will have a question addressed to Rodrigo and Maria Dolores.
No, you're totally right. I've been wanting to do some heterogeneous analysis on that, and we always say, okay, we're going to do that, and we always forget. So that's really interesting. I think, I mean, and there are you know, quite heterogeneous municipalities. Even within Santiago, you have income, age, etc. So and that of course plays out on the risk of getting COVID and so on. In the regressions in particular, so in both models, the event study and the extended difference in difference framework, we're using municipality fixed effects. So we're kind of covering for the fact that some of these markers are staying constant, so people are not moving, and so we're using the fixed effects to account for that. But I think it's really interesting, and we're still missing on understanding the heterogeneous effects, and that's totally well taken.
Okay, so thanks a lot. So I'll just also have a quick question addressed to either Rodrigo and Maria Dolores. There are so many interesting questions for both of presentations that I'll just focus in one. Okay, you guys mentioned that your dependent variable is the amount of feminicide. Yes, am I right? I just
yes.
want to be sure what you guys are modeling. I mean, are you guys trying to address the impact on homicides with female victims or on feminicide? Because people outside the economics, they really put a lot of stress on this difference, okay? Because feminicide it's really a homicide of a woman with gender, I mean, with a big gender issue, what they call. And by the way, the amount of feminicide is really small in statistical terms, but it's so impactant that they really address. So I just want to know, it's really homicide with a female victim or feminicide that you're modeling. I just want to know this, and if this is either one or the other one, it's going to be very important that we stress this difference.
In this, we are starting the work. We are in the this is a very preliminary results and analysis. But in this, we are estimating not only inside home murder, it's all femicides. It may be happen in street and any other contexts, and maybe the cause we are working to create another variable more specific for these cases, but in this preliminary analysis, it's all
okay. That's nice. So it's
not specific one.
Yeah, so it seems that it's homicide where the victim is a female. So it's okay. So great. Yes, I mean, I have so many other questions, okay, because it's very interesting. But as far as I know, we only have 10 minutes. Yes, Paula. I mean, and I think it's much more reasonable to hand to the audience to ask questions. I see that there are many questions as well here. So, I mean, so Paula, would you please manage this part? And if you still have time, I can, I mean, interact more. Very interesting. I mean, congratulations. Okay, so Paula, please take it over now a little bit.
Sure. Okay. We have two questions here for Dolores and Rodrigo. One from Caio. He says that the result is that the emergency aid seems to alleviate the femicides during the pandemic, but it was not clear if the results were still positive even after controlling for emergency aid. And also, I'll ask the two questions, and then Dolores and Rodrigo can ask together. And also a question about the event study to compare the pre-trends of the treatment and control groups.
Okay, go ahead.
I think it's for me. Yes, we have estimated the event study, but we haven't presented because it needs more, but preliminary results show it's okay, but there are some points, and because of this, we haven't presented and we haven't time to present all these things here, but this is, we intend to deepen in this line. Thank you, Bruna. And Caio, yes, I think you asked if but
about the emergency aid. How the emergency aid
yes,
reduce the femicides, and if they are still positive even after controlling
yes,
that.
I think we have many specifications. It depends on control group. In some kind, it became negative, but in others, it maintains positive. And we need to better study these classes and to include, and maybe it will be possible to include other control groups after we have other database. But thanks for the questions.
Thank you, Dolores. May I just make a quick compliment to what José
Paula, sure.
We are considering the femicides and not only the homicides of women. It's only femicides, which is a subset of all the homicides of women in this work. Okay. And Joana Monteiro asked for the floor, and I think Isadora after. So Joana, can you go ahead now, please?
Hi. Well, thank you very much all for the presentations. I have a question to Francisco. I pretty much like your presentation, and actually it's more a comment and a suggestion. My understanding based on your graph is that you have a spike in calls to the crime hotline one month after the beginning of the quarantine, and then there is a huge decline. And I think this is very related to how hotline data works, and pretty much how people call to hotline to ask for support, and whether they're gonna keep calling and keep asking for other government support will depend on government reaction. So you may have the opportunity to actually to understand government capacity and explore variation across how close, whether there are shelters close to the areas that these people call, and whether these shelters does have any capacity or not, because you already have data on that, to actually see the behavior of the crime and not only the crime, but the reports, depending on the capacity of the government to provide an answer to that request. And this is quite important because typically there is a lot of variation on government capacity. And I think we typically understand these things about crime, about I think the key thing in domestic violence is to track the difference between the event and actually reports, right? I think this is the crime event. There is the most dramatic difference between like having reports and really tracking the phenomenon that we are asking. So you may have an opportunity to also to understand reporting with this data. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Can I make a quick comment? Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much. I think that's super interesting, and I haven't thought of the idea of distance to shelters or density or shelter density, right? So that could also be interesting. And we're going to have some information about that on our survey, actually in the previous wave. So it's not a panel so far. So we're going to do the first wave as a panel, and we're going to be able to follow the same women. But in the previous wave, they were asked, did you report? If you didn't, why? And if you did, what were the consequences? Did it work? Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied with the complaint? And to my surprise, out of those who did complain, the satisfaction was okay. So I thought it was going to be terrible, but I was positively surprised by the level of satisfaction. But yes, and we went to actually, so we're going to follow these women and try to understand whether they were able to call all these hotlines and how satisfied they were, etc., etc. So
yes, just a quick comment on that. I think it's more an issue of supply than on quality. So I think these shelters typically have a very, very low capacity. In a moment like that, they should be get full pretty easy. And I think it's also a matter of having information about it. If you're gonna do a survey, you may ask whether people know what to do. They know who to request for help. Typically, I would guess they would say families, but they typically don't know that this service exists. And I think once they know, once they get access to, they have a good quality, not quality, but like if you have any person to ask for help, they typically like rate it as good.
Absolutely. No, thanks a lot. That's our focus, to try to understand the network and where do they seek help, etc., etc. No, thanks a lot. That's super useful.
Okay, guys, we are running out of time. I think that Isadora is anxious to ask. I look at so I think that's going to be the last one, and then we just close everything. Okay, Isadora, go ahead.
Thank you. It's a really question. It's to Francisco. First, congratulations for the great work. And I would like to know if you have information on the type of call and report, like the type of violence, if it's physical or psychological, because I know it's important to know this difference. And I would also like to know if in Chile there's like a specific policy to fight domestic violence in this period, and if you consider the presence of children in home as variable to see the difference. If, I don't know, houses with children, the domestic violence was bigger than house with no children. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So very quick. And there was a law, actually it was passed, I think 1 or 2 years ago. So there is a law, and actually in the survey, in the previous wave, they asked women whether they knew that there was a specific law about domestic violence. And again, to my surprise, the awareness was quite high. Above 90% of women were aware. And regarding children, that's definitely one of the key stressors. And unfortunately, so in the stuff that I show you, we know nothing about the calls. We know a little bit. I think for some cases, for some type of calls, we do have whether it was psychological, the type of violence, etc. But we know nothing else. They are anonymous, and in some cases we don't even know the municipality. So the data we're using, the one I'm showing you, is for the one which we know the municipality from where the call was made, right? And then for the number of children. So this is something we're going to have in the survey. We're going to know, and we're going to follow and ask them to tell us during the pandemic where were they living, with whom, etc. So we want to we want to get at that, definitely.
Okay, guys. So we have just only 3 minutes which I would like to share fairly with Maria, Dolores, and with Francisco. and with myself. So Maria, just 1 minute, exactly 1 minute, just for final closing, and then Francisco, please do the same, and then I will just finish the session, please. Okay, Maria.
Only to thank you very much. It was a very interesting time, and we learned so many things. Thank you for the audience questions, and especially for Francisco, Rodrigo, and you, José Raimundo, for accepting to stay here. Thank you all.
Okay, you're very welcome. Rodrigo, I just saw you, so I think it's fair to give you also 1 minute. Okay, so actually, Rodrigo, so sorry, Francisco, and then I give you also as well 1 minute after Rodrigo.
I'll be very quick there, so to allow Francisco to speak for longer there. It's just to tell you, yeah, thank everybody for coming to the session. Really great discussion. It's a shame that we don't have an extra hour, because that could go on and on. I have questions to Francisco, but probably we can discuss these over email perhaps later. So just thank the audience also for the questions. They really make us think and improve our work. So yeah, thanks very much. And José Raimundo, thanks very much for chairing the session in a great way. The same to Paulo. So thanks everybody.
Okay, thanks a lot. So Francisco, your 1 minute, please.
Yeah, very brief. Same here. I appreciate a lot all the comments, and if you have more suggestions, feel free to email me. We are right now designing the questionnaire. So all of the comments you made about the survey, these are super helpful. And we need to finish it now. So all comments about the survey are absolutely welcome. And I have to say that I wish I were in Brazil presenting. So I hope next year I'll be there with you.
Sure. So okay, I'll just use my 1 minute and finish everything. So thanks a lot. I mean, thanks Maria Dolores, thanks Fabiana, Paula, Rodrigo, and also Francisco for the nice presentations. Of course, I would have the dozens of questions and also humble suggestions for this very nice project. Definitely, I would like to interact with both groups, okay, more. I do have a huge data set, which is longitudinal and more. I'm following more than 10,000 women since 2016 with data sets on domestic violence and many things. It's a huge project. I would like to discuss with you potential interest. Also, I'd like to stress that I work with Sonia, Francisco. I really love her. Sonia is very nice. And that's it. Thanks a lot. I mean, thanks for everything. Thanks to the audience. And hopefully, we're going to see more men working this agenda. It's very important to have more men. Okay, and I congratulate Rodrigo and Francisco for this. It's very nice to have guys as good as you. I mean, helping not only the scientific part of this whole agenda, but hopefully the policy and also the activism part. So thanks a lot. And I think it's time to finish everything. So bye-bye. So long.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.